Wisconsin is in Oshkosh at the Democratic Party State Convention. One of 10 Democratic candidates running for governor is Josh Pade of Kenosha. He just spoke to the convention, and this is his first interview with Wisconsin. Josh, thanks for taking time to talk to us.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
Now, anybody who might have been surprised that you were among the 10 to file 2,000 signatures and said, Josh Pade, who is Josh Pade? Tell us who you are.
Thanks. It was definitely an experience. I jumped in this race. Obviously, I'm a latecomer to the cycle, but we went in, and I went old school campaigning door to door and talked to folks. Particularly, I went through my hometown and introduced myself. I actually went to the house I grew up in and said hello to all the neighbors on the street. And there was one house, the people still live there from when I was a kid.
Oh, really?
So they remembered me, and I said, well, a governor could come from this street. But yeah, I grew up in Kenosha. I grew up across the street from Lincoln Park, lower middle class neighborhood. And it was, a total experience. I grew up, my grandparents were part of the labor movement of Kenosha. Both my grandparents worked in the factories, worked for American Motors and then Chrysler. And my grandma was a Rosie the Riveter back in World War II. And we experienced firsthand the deindustrialization that happened in Kenosha and Racine. I think that was really what kind of inspired me to start looking into politics. Between my grandparents, I was putting up Dukakis signs when I was 8 years old. And watching what was happening to the economy, it made me really focus, particularly in 1992. I'm 12 years old, just got into politics, interested in politics. And watched the Feingold race, and in some ways I'm inspired by him, because that race he was the long shot candidate who wrote his campaign ad on his garage door and went out and talked to people.
Campaign promises on his Middleton garage door.
Yep, and it's something that inspires me to this day. But when I was 14, my father passed away, and it changed our lives. We he worked in IT, worked down in Chicagoland area, and it drastically, plunged our family into struggle. And, we relied on grandparents, on family, and, trying to do whatever we could to get paycheck to paycheck, like so many of our families in Wisconsin do. And at that point, all of the kind of interest I had as a child in politics became very real. Mm-hmm. So, my interest in someday I'm going to run for office kind of came from that period in our lives where I said, oh, this is what people do when they go to Madison or they go to Washington, D.C., and they try to make change. I went to work. We moved to Marshfield when I was in my senior year of high school, and I was given an opportunity to work in management there. I put off college and traveled around the state, and it was incredible. I learned how to run a business. I had hundreds of people working for me, or working with me that I was responsible for, and I learned to be a buyer merchandiser, and kind of gained that perspective that I think helps when you are in politics and in government and you want to figure out the best way to grow a business. It helps when you've worked in it. But I didn't do it immune from the public sphere. I was constantly active, and when I did go through college, I went to Eau Claire, and I went to DC to work with Russ Feingold for the summer when I was interning, and kind of fell in love with the process and worked my way through law school. And then went back to DC, and I was working, and I really learned how to get legislation passed, how to get small things passed through committees, where we often focus on what the big, at least particularly in DC, focus on what the big headline is or what the news of the day is. But there's a lot that can happen when you bring Republicans and Democrats together and find out what their common goal is and what their common interest is. And that's something I learned, and I took that and I left DC and wanted to plant my roots and eventually at some point see if I could run for office. And after watching the elections of the last couple of years, and then definitely the 2016 election, I realized that this was a time to do it, to get in the race.
Are you a Bernie baby?
I'm not a Bernie baby.
Okay.
I volunteered with the Hillary campaign, but I totally identified with both Bernie's message, and I knew why he would do well in Wisconsin, particularly in the primary. I talked to a lot of people that were working with the campaign, volunteers, not from Wisconsin, and I said, you don't understand, like, people in the state have been longing for someone that's going to speak real to them, give them solutions, and not be a part of the the DC class of this is what we've determined you want to hear, and we're going to tell it to you, and then you're going to turn out and vote for us. And I mean that's just not the way things work in Wisconsin. And we're fiercely independent, and we'll vote Republicans and we'll vote Democrats, and it's all about doing the work. And I when we were having this conversation, thinking about doing it, I started thinking about it at the convention last year about whether I would do this. And we know what it's like in Wisconsin to have an unpopular opponent that just wins. And as Democrats, we have to realize that just because the fact that Scott Walker is not a popular governor, or that he would trail a generic Democrat, that doesn't mean we're going to win. The winning is up to us. We have to organize that win. We have to present a message that wins at the end of the day. And that's what I'm hoping I can do, either me as the nominee or whoever becomes, figure out a path forward for the party that wins across the state of Wisconsin.
Okay, now you have a law degree. Are you now a practicing attorney?
I'm not practicing. I've worked in enterprise risk and crisis management around the globe and done some compliance work, but I don't practice as an attorney.
So you've watched the crowd of Democratic candidates for governor assemble over the last year.
Yeah.
And you decided to get into it. Why? Did you find them lacking, or you got better ideas, or what?
So, it's interesting. We do have so many candidates, and they come from all different walks of life. We have a businessman. We have people that have worked in Madison, either in legislative politics or in administrative policy, and I think it reflects all the different areas of life that people want to see changed in the state of Wisconsin. For me, it really was. There was an opening. An opportunity. There's an opportunity for the party to grow, and it's just not going to happen. And I didn't see that moment being seized upon within the current crop of candidates. Right. And I wanted to get out there and I wanted to do it. And I've been campaigning over the last month and a half or so full time. I've met and listened to so many people who, they're just so proud to have a Democrat come to their areas, particularly in southeastern Wisconsin, my hometown, where I met a lot of people who were the Obama-Trump voter, who are totally open and willing to vote for a Democrat, and they just feel that the Democratic Party hasn't been speaking to them. And I think me getting in the race is going to help the party as a whole, and help those families.
I want to ask you about 3 issues on your website.
Yep.
And what you do about it. When you say our middle class is struggling, what would you as governor do about that?
Okay, so I think there's a couple things we do. I come from a tax background. And I had wrote a quick piece about this in the Wisconsin State Journal, that I want to put together a bipartisan group to reform our tax code. Scott Walker touts his tax cuts. Unfortunately, Wisconsin's still one of the highest tax states in the country, and it's also a very regressive tax state. I think there's tremendous opportunity to offer tax relief to the middle class families, and look at better ways of growing revenue that can also foster business growth. Okay. And that's part of the thing I want to do.
According to your website, our infrastructure is crumbling. How would you pay for the state's highways?
So
bridges.
I'm open to a number of ways. I think we have to look at open road tolling. I think both for federal money and just as a matter of expanding the base of toll users. So when you go to Illinois, you got to pay to use their roads, and you notice that because their roads are a little bit better when you go down there. Yep. I have no problem with asking Illinois people when they drive up to Wisconsin to pay a little bit more, or Minnesota people when they come over. So I think I'm open to open road tolling, but I think it should be used as a way to expand the base of people who do it, and then I'm open to indexing the gas tax.
Then finally, on your website, quote, our healthcare system is bankrupting us, end of quote. What steps would you recommend as governor?
Okay, so first of all, we need to take the Medicaid expansion, and I think that's pretty much a consensus on all the Democratic candidates. And then we need to look at how we make healthcare affordable for everyone, and reform Medicaid to bring costs down. And that's a complex issue with a lot of different moving parts, but it's about bringing innovation, about bringing choice, about allowing partnering with our providers to ensure that we are delivering care and that we have a base level of access for everyone in the state of Wisconsin.
Is the ultimate answer universal health care?
At a federal level, yes, but you look at states that have tried to do like a single payer style at the state level, and it just doesn't. It's not economically feasible because our national healthcare system is so expensive. When you just try to take that at a state level and give it to everybody, Vermont tried it, Colorado looked at it, California looked at it, and it just didn't work. The things that worked, I think, if you want to look at an example that we could look at is, San Francisco tried to do a kind of an all-payer partnership to have a guaranteed level of healthcare for their residents, and I wouldn't say I would copy that, but I think it's a way where you can see a path forward to providing universal access without, with absence of there being help from the federal level.
Does Wisconsin need changes in its gun laws? If so, what?
I think that for gun laws in Wisconsin, we need to focus on, expanding background checks, making sure that, criminals aren't getting guns, and focusing on gun crimes. So for me, it's, the biggest gun crime is suicide. So focusing on mental health. The next one is domestic violence. So people that have restraining orders, ensuring that they can't go and get a weapon. And then, just being common sense about it, making sure that people are trained and that there's gun safety. Wisconsin has a really great tradition, not just of hunting, but gun ownership. There is a father and their kids. They teach them how to properly use a gun across the entire state of Wisconsin. Then they go out and they go hunting. And I think we've actually been kind of a model about that good tradition. And I think that it's something we can preserve and do it in a smart way that prevents criminals from using guns in the wrong way.
What's your position on the Foxconn incentives? $2.85 billion from the state, but when you add the local and transportation, it's up to about 4.5. Is that a good deal for your region?
So I'm hoping it's going to be good for southeastern Wisconsin. It's too much. It's way too much money than what we should have spent, and I think it poses a lot of challenges. I mean, we have companies that are saying, well, we want the same deal that Foxconn is getting, or we're going to leave the state. So I think that the next governor has to really go forward with a standard on what our economic development policies are going to be, so that we're not every year guessing which company is going to leave or ask, basically hold the economy of a region hostage. For Foxconn, it's my big thing is the environment, holding them to environmental standards, and then holding them to their job creation, and ensuring that development actually helps Racine and Kenosha and Milwaukee and all those areas, and then trying to pivot that towards a statewide set of growth policies that can pivot off of Foxconn.
As governor, let's stay on Foxconn for a minute.
Okay.
As governor, if you detected a breach on their part of the contracts that the state have signed, would you try to end that deal?
If I detected a breach, I would go after them right away, and I would hold them accountable for it immediately. And I would make sure that they knew that any violation would be immediately met with using every avenue we could to hold them accountable for it. With any company in any relationship, you have an expectation of what you're going to get from that deal, and if they don't meet that expectation, you have to immediately respond to that. So, regardless of what the deal looks like or what their development looks like when we get to January, we need to hold them accountable and make sure they know we're going to hold them accountable.
Do you trust Foxconn to invest $10 billion and hire up to 13,000?
No.
You do not?
I don't trust them for that level. I think they are going to invest. I mean, they're clearly, they want to have a base of operations here, and they need the water for screens. So I trust them for that. But globally, they're investing in automation. So I doubt the job numbers will materialize. I hope they do. But the 13,000 is a best case scenario, right?
Yeah.
And as we move to automation, and as we move, frankly, for screens that are not, the TVs now are being produced with OLED technology is the future. So how they've already announced that they're going to be focusing more on smaller LCD screens. So, their business is pretty fluid, and they never kind of stick with one thing for very long. So, I think that's a big thing, particularly for the region, is that I don't think we can let southeastern Wisconsin become a factory town. Okay. If Foxconn 20 years down the road decides, well, this was a nice deal, we're gone, we don't need the region to go back in a depression like they did when all the factories closed 20 years ago.
Let's talk about public schools. Are we spending enough in state aid on our K-12 system, public schools?
No, we need to restore our funding, and we need to fix the funding formula. Wisconsin has the largest achievement gap of any state in the country, and that's a product of how our funding works. That's one of the components of it. And I think we need to have a targeted program to make sure that every child, no matter what zip code you're in, has the opportunity for a good education.
What about the choice and charter program? Would you keep it as it is? Would you recommend expanding it? Would you scale it down or repeal it?
So I'm not in favor of vouchers, the voucher program. I think that when you look at it based purely on evidence, there is no statistical evidence that kids that go to the voucher schools have a better chance of getting a degree than kids that go to public school. I think they have about a 6% chance of better chance of going to college, but no better chance of getting a college degree. So I just, if I was presented with a program that said this is working, we have evidence to show this is working, I would be open to staying with it. But as far as the charter program is concerned, I think we can work with it and improve it, but I'm not going to give up on it because there are charter schools that can do really good things.
If you're the governor, your first budget, would it restore both elements of Act 10, restoration of collective bargaining rights, plus making public employees pay less for pension and health care?
So, I think we have to... I was actually asked earlier about, repealing Act 10. And I said, I don't think we can do a full, clean repeal of Act 10. I think it's an unrealistic political promise to people that were harmed by Act 10, and it reignites an old fight that we don't need to reignite. I think we need to improve collective bargaining for public employees and private employees, restore some of those rights, but we also do have to be cost conscious. So I think we have to, understand that, states are doing more with less. When Act 10 was passed, was a $3.5 billion deficit we were facing, and we need to move forward in making sure that we are increasing pay and that we are doing things to attract public workers and teachers, but to just go back and put an obligation on the state that would, set us up for a deficit down the road where we have to go through this all again, I think is just easy politics that doesn't play out well.
Part of that Act 10 debate is how much public employees should pay for health care and pensions. Do you think they're paying their fair share?
It depends on everyone's a little bit different, but, I think putting in those reforms that had to be put in, made it better for the state and for the communities. So, if we could give more, I would love to give more, but we have to look at it, we have to, like a budget. This is dollars and cents that we're dealing with. So understanding how we can give the best that we can give without making promises that we can't keep.
What's your position on both legalizing medical marijuana and recreational marijuana?
So I actually talked to the governor of Colorado about this, and my initial stance was basically, okay, well, medical marijuana for certain, right? Because states that have medical marijuana have lower opioid overdoses, and there's a lot of people that are in pain. But ultimately, I think the path forward is legalization, with regulation, with taxes, with ensuring that it's done in a proper way and sold in a proper way. But it could be huge for the state of Wisconsin. We could reduce how much we're paying in criminal justice because of marijuana. We could take marijuana off the streets so people aren't getting it from criminals. We could raise revenue that we can use for education. Mm-hmm. And we can create an entire new industry here in the state of Wisconsin through growers. And ultimately, I think the whole nation is kind of headed towards a path of legalization. And it would be really nice if Wisconsin had a leapfrog on other states for when the United States gets there, so that we could, sell to other states our crops, basically. So that's my position on that.
What are your thoughts on the next steps, to fight the opioid and heroin and methamphetamine use addiction?
So, one of those is, pursuing alternative pain relief, so medical marijuana or legalization. But, we have to go after the drug companies that are selling these opioids. And, Josh Call's been talking a lot about this on the trail about going after these companies from a justice standpoint. Yes. But, you go to the hospital and you get a pill of Vicodin or Percocet that will set you up for addiction. And then, that's not the proper way of doing things. And I think we need to have a regulated way of how people get opioids. And I think that's the first step. And then the second step is understanding the communities where these people are left behind and they're depressed. And that goes back to the economy again. People that you look at these areas where people are overdosing, they've kind of lost hope. And I think we need to restore hope to those communities.
Resident undergrad tuition on the UW campus has been frozen for 6 years. Mm-hmm. Should that freeze continue for a 7th and 8th year?
So it is. We have a situation now where it's been frozen, but it's still expensive for a lot of families, and the university is struggling with it. We've lost a lot of professors. We've had a brain drain in the state, And ultimately, what'll end up happening is we'll get to a point where the tuition freeze will go away and tuition will jump. So I was actually in college when we came out of a tuition freeze, and then was a 22% tuition increases. I forgot what year that was. Was it 2003 or 2004? So it doesn't seem like a good long-term strategy to just keep it frozen. But we have to understand that coming out of it could create a huge problem. We don't want tuition to go up dramatically. So I think what we need to focus on is how do we have a university system that has affordable tuition for everybody, and a supported university in this, a system that is best in class. And part of the thing that I've been talking about is doing things like free 2-year college or tech college tuition credits or 4-year college tuition credits in exchange for public service. So I would love to see, and we're going to put together a more formal package of what a Wisconsin public service program would look like for kids that want to go to school but want to be active in their communities, and make it kind of a transactional situation.
Well, on a related subject, what would a Josh Pade administration do on the issue of student debt, student loans?
So we need to let students refinance their loans. I came out of law school. I had about $200,000 worth of debt out of law school.
Are you still paying it?
I'm still paying it. I'll be paying it for a while. And it's a mortgage, and it holds people back. And I think part of the public service thing too is also student loan forgiveness for public service. I think that's something that we can look into. And ultimately, it's allowing people to refinance their debt and making sure that students aren't subject to predatory lending by private student lenders. Okay. One thing I was fortunate is that all my loans are public loans, so it's all indexed to my income, so I have a reasonable payment. I'm not stuck with something that's going to hold me back. Right. But it's there. It's looming. It's a big amount that I pay a little bit on every day, every month.
The U.S. Supreme Court recently said states can regulate sports betting. Mm-hmm. Do you think Wisconsin should consider doing that, maybe as a source of income, or?
Yeah, I think we should look into it. It just came down, was it last week?
Yeah.
And I think we need to look into it. I think it could be an opportunity if done right. We have some great traditions of gaming in the state of Wisconsin. So adding sports betting to that could be huge.
Okay. Then final question, your elevator speech. I'm Josh Pade. I'm running for governor, and I'm better than the other 9 candidates because finish it.
Because I'm going to bring new leadership, a fresh vision, and a global perspective to the state of Wisconsin, and let people be heard all through the state of Wisconsin again.
Josh Pade of Kenosha, one of the 10 Democratic candidates who spoke to the state convention. Thanks very much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.